Good afternoon and welcome to the Thursday, April 1st, 2 p.m. agenda of the Consumer Protection and Commerce Committee of the House of Representatives. Welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually today. We thank you for being a part of our proceedings. Also, thank you to the members for joining us. In case this is your first time with the CPC committee, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping and ground rules that'll help to facilitate and expedite our hearings today. One, just to let our testifiers know, there is a 2-minute time limit imposed. So once you reach the expiration of your 2 minutes, I will kindly ask you to begin to summarize and wrap up your testimony. This is to ensure that we're able to hear many of these important measures today. And I thank you for your cooperation there. Also, I did want to mention that if you can keep yourself muted when you're not testifying, your name will be called in your organization, which should give you plenty of time to testify. But if you can keep yourself muted, that'll also help facilitate our proceedings today. And lastly, I think one of the things that makes Hawaii so special vis-a-vis many other places, especially what's going on nationally, is that we extend aloha and common courtesy to each other. And it's my hope and plea and expectation that we will do so in today's proceedings, whether we happen to agree or not. So I would ask for your cooperation there as well. With that, we'll go ahead and get started today. Let me just, excuse me one moment. Okay. First off, we'll start off with measure Senate Bill 151, and this is relating to the statewide traffic code. This replaces the term accident with collision for purposes of certain provisions of the statewide traffic code. On SB 151, we have the Department of Transportation in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair members. Lina Rocky-Regan on behalf of the State Department of Transportation. We stand on a written testimony and support, and we're available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. We also have the Honolulu Police Department, Calvin Tong, in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Major Calvin Tong with the Honolulu Police Department. We stand by our testimony in support of this bill.
Thank you very much, Major. Members, please also note that we have additional supportive testimony from the City Prosecutor's Office for Honolulu, as well as individual testimony in support. On this measure, members of the legislature, any questions? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 151, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, SB 1333. And this is relating to the Uniform Controlled Substances Act. This updates the Uniform Controlled Substances Act to be consistent with federal changes and amendments to controlled substances law. This would also exempt hemp from this act, and it removes cannabidiol drugs that have been approved by FDA from the list of Schedule 5 substances, as well as from the provisions of the Penal Code. On SB 1333, we have the Attorney General's Office, Michelle Pu'u.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Michelle Pu'u. I'm a Deputy Attorney General with the department in the Criminal Division. I'm essentially a statewide prosecutor. We do support the intent of this bill, but did note legal concerns regarding the single subject matter rule. And I am available for questions should the committee have any.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. Members, please note that that is the extent of our testifiers who've indicated that they would be present today. We also have supportive testimony from an organization and an individual on this same measure, SB 1333. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 1333. Oh, Representative Har.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I have the Attorney General's office on, please? Michelle.
Hi there.
How are you? Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Just quickly, I apologize. I haven't had a chance to, I just perused through your written testimony. What are the concerns that the Department of the Attorney General has?
Essentially, the subject of the bill is the basically the Controlled Substances Act in 329. Therefore, when you're making or seeking to make changes in the criminal code, the penal code in section 712, that violates the single subject rule. So that's why we brought that to the committee's attention.
Okay, so arguably then the subject matter of the bill does not necessarily conform to the subject matter of the title of the bill
That's correct.
and could be then found unconstitutional.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Poole. Thank you,
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Har. Members, any additional questions on SB 1333? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item, SB 244. This is relating to food donation. This would expand liability protections for donors to include donation of food and similar donations made to needy persons by organizations. It authorizes the donation of expired food when the donor reasonably believes in good faith that the food remains fit for human consumption. Please note, members, we did not see a bill like this in any of our House testimony, our House hearings, excuse me. First off, we have our only testifier who has indicated that they would be present to testify virtually. Brian Miyamoto with the Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We'll stand on a written testimony in support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, also please note that we have comments from the Department of Health as well as supportive testimony from various organizations, businesses, and an individual on SB 244. Members, any questions on SB 244? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, SB 329. This is relating to condominiums. This is substantially similar to the measure we passed, House Bill 305, out of this CPC committee as well as out of the House previously this year. This shortens the notice period from 60 to 30 days for a board to sell, store, or donate or dispose of personality when, personality when the identity and address of the owner are known. So it allows for the disposition of both unclaimed property for when it's known, or property, when both the identity of the owner is known as well as when the identity of it is not known, and how to dispose of it in condos. On SB 329, we have, we only have one of our testifiers present, Sandy Wong, testifying in support as an individual.
Good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair and members of the committee. This is Sandy Wong. I am testifying today as a condo owner and resident. I strongly support this measure. Currently, the process to get rid of or dispose of items at condos is very expensive and very arduous. And so this bill is desperately needed. I am a board member of HCCA, and HCCA does support this measure. And I am available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Please note that we have all supportive testimonies from organizations and associations as well as individuals, which is a rarity on condo law. So let's take a pause to celebrate. But that's the extent of our present testifiers. Members, any questions on SB 329%? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our next agenda item. SB 474, this is relating to real property transactions, and this requires mandatory seller disclosures in real estate transactions to include the identification of residential real properties lying within the sea level rise exposure zone. Please note, members, that we passed out HB 554, which is a substantially similar bill to this from the Consumer Protection and Commerce Committee as well as the House. So this is our second time around, second pass on this. On SB 474, we have, let's see, so DLNR is not present. Okay, unfortunately, members, only DLNR was scheduled to testify on this measure, but they are not here. So please note that we have all supportive testimonies from both governmental organizations as well as different associations and organizations and an individual. Unfortunately, there's not someone to ask a question to members, but at least this is the second time we're hearing this measure. So we'll move on from SB 474 then to SB 489. This is relating to agricultural buildings. This increases the maximum area for each agricultural shade cloth structure, cold frame, and greenhouse that qualify the structure for an exemption from building permit and building code requirements. This is also substantially similar to a house measure that we passed out, House Bill 96, earlier from both CPC and the House. We have a very generous water, land, and ag chair who are very magnanimous to our Senate colleagues and move their bills. On SB 489, we have the Department of Agriculture in support.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee, Phyllis Shimabukuro Geyser. On behalf of the department, we stand on our written testimony in support. Mahalo.
Thank you. We also have Ulupono Initiatives, Micah Munekata in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Johanson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, members of the committee. Micah Munikata here on behalf of the Ulupono Initiative. We stand on our testimony in strong support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have the University of Hawaii, Nicholas Comerford.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Nick Comerford, representing the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources at the University of Hawaii. We stand on our testimony with strong support and are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lastly, we have Brian Miyamoto with the Hawaii Farm Bureau in support.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We'll stand on a written testimony in support. And I'd just like to highlight that if the legislature does allow for larger structures, these large structures would still need to comply with applicable state and county zoning codes. So it's just the building code exemption and the permitting that this would be exempt. So, thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Members, I believe that's all of our testifiers indicating that they would be present in this virtual hearing to testify. And please note that we also have additional supportive testimony from governmental organizations, associations, as well as an individual. Members, any questions on SB 489? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to SB 186. This is relating to restrictions on agricultural uses and activities. This disallows the enforcement of re-recorded homeowners association restriction if the restriction prohibits bona fide agricultural uses and activities on agricultural land. For SB 489, I'm sorry, excuse me, 186, we have again the Department of Agriculture in support.
Aloha Chair, yes, our department stands on its written testimony supporting the intent of the measure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We also have the Hawaii Farm Bureau, Brian Miyamoto.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We'll stand on a written testimony supporting this measure.
Thank you. And we also have John Wooten with Wooten's Produce of Kauai. Mr. Wooten, are you there? We can see that you're in the hearing. But...
Yes, I think I'm here now.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Second, what do you call it? Anyway, thank you so much, Chair Johanson and Vice Chair Kitagawa, and the members of the House Committee on Consumer Protection and Commerce. I'm a busy farmer here and don't get involved in political matters much, but a few years ago, HRS 4.6 Act 5 was passed to protect home farms created on agriculturally zoned lands. And it was passed with an overwhelming override of Linda Linger's veto, especially with support helped by Roy Oyama, Gary Hoosier, and many, many others. So basically, this Act 5 makes it redundantly clear that HOAs on ag zone land cannot restrict farming with CC&Rs. A few farmers were affected by a grandfather clause added to Act 5 that allowed that CC&Rs created before Act 5 are not affected by Act 5. When an HOA allows the original CC&Rs to expire and then renews the same CC&Rs, then these renewed CC&Rs are in fact new. These expired and renewed CC&Rs are no longer protected by a grandfather clause in Act 5, since they are now new CC&Rs. An argument against this SB 186 might be, we have enough laws in place. If a farmer has any problems, they can hire lawyers and fight it out. And of course, this is no argument at all. How many farmers can afford a lawyer? And do farmers want to spend their time involved in legal cases? No. Hawaii farmers want to be growing food and tending their crops. The more clarity and redundancy we legislate to protect farming and honest, hardworking farmers in Hawaii, the better. So thank you for considering my testimony.
Very much, Mr. Wooten. Members, that's the extent of our present testifiers signed up to virtually testify on SB 186. Please note there's also supportive testimony from the Office of Planning, as well as individual testimony in support. Members, any questions on SB 186? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 186, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, SB 345. This is relating to cosmetics. This bans the import for profit, sale, or offer for a sale of any cosmetic in the state if the final product or component of the final product was developed or manufactured using animal testing performed on or after January 2022 in a cruel manner. Please note, members, that we also passed out each House equivalent of this, House Bill 1088, from both the CPC committee as well as the House. So we have seen a substantially similar bill to SB 345. On SB 345, we have our first testifier, the Hawaiian Humane Society, Stephanie Kendrick. Okay, no longer present. We have Inga Gibson with Cruelty Free US and Pona.
Aloha. Thank you. Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Strong support SB 345. As you mentioned, you had earlier considered HB 1088, the House companion. This is a measure that we've worked with the industry on for many years with the support of the Personal Care Products Council. They represent 600 cosmetic companies and manufacturers across the globe. We do, Chair, just have one request amendment for your consideration on page 3, lines 5 and 6. The prior committee had referenced our state animal cruelty statute. I just wanted to clarify that fortunately, the testing that is referred to in the bill does not occur in Hawaii. So there is no need to actually reference our animal cruelty statute. Further, because the testing doesn't occur in Hawaii, keeping the reference to our cruelty statute would essentially, create enforcement issues because, of course, we can't enforce testing that occurs in another state or even another country. So we would request that that be removed. And then, of course, your consideration of a good effective date. And then if I may just conclude by reminding the committee that this does not impact retailers whatsoever. There is no need for them to remove any of their products from the shelves. This the onus is basically on the manufacturers who support this measure with us. And this also does not impact any other kind of medical research or any other kind of research involving animals. It's specific to cosmetics. And as we speak, the governor of Maryland has the same bill on his desk. Last week, Virginia adopted the same legislation, and hopefully Hawaii will be next to join the EU and 30 other countries as well. Mahalo.
Thank you, Inga. We also have, with Cruelty Free International, Monica Engbretson.
Yes, thank you. Aloha, Chair and Committee. On behalf of Cruelty Free International, we of course strong support this bill and echo many of Inga's statements. I will mention again that we worked hard with the industry to come to agreements on this bill, and that this bill is largely identical to bills that have already been passed in California, Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia, and soon in Maryland, with the exception of that reference to the cruelty statute, which I think was put in an attempt to be helpful, but it kind of complicates things for the reasons that Inga mentioned, as well as that cruelty statutes don't apply to things that happen in laboratories. So it effectively kind of makes the bill moot, because that is where animal testing takes place. And manufacturers understand what we mean by animal testing. They are specific sets of tests for specific safety endpoints that do always cause harm and pain to the animals. The term of animal testing is defined very clearly in the bill in a way that the manufacturers understand and have agreed to, as well as cosmetic, which clarifies that when we're talking about human cosmetics, when we are talking about that. So I think maybe there was an interest in further clarifying it, but it's not necessary and actually complicates things. The term cruelty isn't used in the bill other than the name of the bill, because it's commonly understood that cruelty-free cosmetics are those that aren't tested on animals, but the term itself isn't used in the text of the bill. We, of course, I'll wrap up in case there's any questions. We strongly urge the support, and we've done polling that shows that 8 out of 10 people support a bill. And when you look at it across age groups and political affiliations, they are equally supportive of ending cosmetics testing on animals. And so we thank you, and mahalo.
Thank you, Monica. Members, please note that's the extent of our present testifiers to testify virtually, but we also have supportive testimony from other various organizations, as well as the Department of Health and individuals in support. Members, any questions on SB 345? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 345, then we will move on to SB 1387. This is relating to microchip identification. It requires dog and cat owners to microchip their pets. And we did not hear the House companion of this measure, so this is our first time on this particular subject in CPC. For SB 1387, we have the Department of Agriculture offering comments.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. The department appreciates the amendment made by the House Committee on Agriculture to exclude our animal quarantine branch from the definition of owner. We'd like to note that our plant quarantine branch also regulates prohibited hybrid dogs and cats, and may be subject to the same owner requirements under this measure, should such animals be confiscated and subsequently require short-term confinement and care. As such, the department respectfully requests a further amendment to exclude plant quarantine branch from the definition of owner. Accordingly, we ask that all department quarantine facilities be excluded from the definition of owner. Mahalo.
Thank you. We also have, okay, not present. We have the American Bird Conservancy, Grant Sizemore with comments.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Grant Sizemore, speaking on behalf of American Bird Conservancy. We stand on our written testimony and are available for any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Stephanie Hundred is not here. Okay. Members, please note that that's the extent of our present virtual testifiers. We also have comments in support and opposition from other individuals and an organization in support. Members, any questions on SB 1387? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 1387, then we'll move to our next agenda item, SB 768. This is relating to zero emission vehicles. This would establish the Rental Car Modernization Task Force to develop a plan to determine the feasibility of installing electric vehicle charging infrastructure to support a 100% zero emission rental motor vehicle fleet by 2035. It requires the task force to submit findings and a report to the legislature, and ultimately allows for the disposition of the task force. On SB 768, we have the Department of Transportation in support.
Good afternoon again, Lina Regan for the State Department of Transportation. We stand on a written testimony supporting the intent. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Avis Budget Group, Kendall Matsuyoshi, offering comments.
Good afternoon, Chair Johanson, Vice Chair Kitagawa, and members of the committee. Kendall Matsuyoshi testifying on behalf of Avis Budget, providing comments. We appreciate the previous committee's amendments to increase the number of members of the rental car industry from 1 to 2, as well as a representative of the auto manufacturing industry, as our cars, the cars we have are subject to what's being produced. We welcome the opportunity to participate on the rental car modernization task force, and thank you for your efforts to address EV charging infrastructure needs first. Mahalo.
Thank you, Kendall. We also have Tiffany Yajima with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation offering comments.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Tiffany Yajima for the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. We provided comments on this measure and asked for an amendment to section 2B8 to change the word company to trade association. As each manufacturer has its own views on these types of issues, the Alliance can represent the views of the industry as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffany, if you want to continue on behalf of your submitted testimony for Enterprise Holdings, offering comments.
Thank you, Tiffany Yajima for Enterprise Holdings. We appreciate the amendments made in the HD1 and we'll stand on our written testimony supporting the intent of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, please note we also have supportive testimony from the Hawaii State Energy Office, supportive and oppositional testimony from 2 organizations, as well as supportive testimony from individuals. Members, any questions on SB 768?
Sure.
Representative Onishi.
Yeah, for DOT. Hi, Lynn. Are you?
Hi.
You're gonna answer for airports?
I'll try to, Representative.
Okay, with the modernization of the Honolulu rental car facility and the Maui rental car facility, were those designed to be capable of handling 100% electric vehicle?
No, they're not. And so that was our concern with the lack of infrastructure was not planned. The lack of infrastructure causes some concern just because of the cost, and it wasn't planned for electric vehicle charging.
So what would be the estimated cost for upgrading all of the rental vehicle facilities at your airports?
I don't believe an estimate has been determined yet. I can check with airports, but to my knowledge, no cost estimate has been determined to date.
Okay. Do you guys have examples any place else where a fleet of vehicles have been converted to EV and the charging required for that?
I'm not aware of any examples. I can reach out to airports as soon as I'm as soon as I'm able, and I can get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any additional questions on SB 768?
Chair, can I have one follow-up?
Oh, please proceed.
Lynn, again, I wanted to ask, who pay for all of those upgrades at the airport? Who ends up paying?
It would come out of that special fund. You know, as you may know, for every day a person rents a rental car, there is a surcharge tax, and so those funds would go to pay for the construction of the charging infrastructure, as well as, you know, the creation of other rental car parking facilities, Yeah, those surcharge tax revenues go to cover such expenses. Thank you.
So in the design of the Wahoo rental car facility, was there any anticipation of going completely electric vehicles? So in other words, are there any, like plans for how you would wire the electrical charging stations or, within the facility?
No,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any additional questions on SB 768? Okay, seeing no further questions on SB 768, we'll move on to our next agenda item. SB 1212, this is relating to motor vehicle registration. This would require a resolution of an outstanding federal out of service order prior to registration renewals and initial registrations of motor carrier vehicles, and it defines the out of service order. On SB 1212, we have the Department of Transportation in support.
Yes, good afternoon again. Lina Regan for the State Department of Transportation. We stand on a written testimony and strong support and are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, that is the extent of our present testifiers. We also have one individual proffering supportive testimony on SB 1212. Members, any questions on SB 1212? Okay, seeing no questions, then we'll move on to our next item, SB 1291. This is relating to transportation. We did not see a similar House measure. This includes auto cycles equipped with handlebars in the definition of motorcycle in the Hawaii Safety Act. It exempts motorcycles and motor scooters with a roll bar or roll cage from the safety helmet requirement. On SB 1291, we have the Department of Transportation in support.
Yes, the State Department of Transportation stands on its written testimony and support and are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Acromoto Inc., Joel Sheltron in support.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Joel Sheltron and I'm a former state representative from Michigan. I now handle governmental affairs for Arcimoto. This bill makes a small change to the auto cycle definition, which allows the electric Arcimoto to be operated with a regular driver's license. The Arcimoto is front wheel drive. It's electric. It doesn't require shifting or clutching like motorcycles do, or leaning into the curves or balancing. All skills required for a motorcycle, but not required for our vehicle. Arcimoto estimates that less than 8% of Hawaiian residents actually have a license to operate our vehicles as it stands right now, and probably less than 4% of tourists that are coming in from the mainland, according to what I could ascertain. As soon as this legislation is enacted, Arcimoto is going to do a full-scale launch in Hawaii. They look forward to being a responsible member of the Hawaiian business community. Thank you. Available for questions if needed, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Joel, and welcome back to the hearing room, just on the other side of the table. Next, we have Brent Gale offering supportive testimony as an individual.
Honorable Chair and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of SB 1291. My name is Brent Gale. I'm President and Senior Energy Consultant for Strategy Consultant LLC, a Hawaiian company. For reasons explained in my written testimony, I strongly support passage of SB 1291. The passage of SB 1291 will allow three-wheeled electric vehicles with handlebars to be operated with a general Class 3 license. In addition to updating our laws to recognize evolving EV technology, SB 1291 is needed to provide visitors, residents, and fleet operators the option to choose a non-CO2 emitting three-wheeled electric vehicle rather than a CO2 emitting moped or motorcycle, motor scooter, or even a car. Passage of 1291, SB 1291 should be part of our state strategy to reduce CO2 emissions in the transportation sector. It can be implemented now, and it can be implemented with no significant impact on the state treasury. I respectfully request that you pass SB 1291. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gale. Members, please note that's the extent of our present testifiers who will be virtually testifying. We do have additional supportive testimony from organizations and individuals on SB 1291. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 1291, we'll move on to our second to the last agenda item, SB 1150. This is relating to skilled nursing facility license. It would authorize the Department of Health to recognize national accreditation or certification organizations. We did not hear a similar House measure, members. First off, we have the Department of Health in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. This is Keith Ridley on behalf of the Director of Health.
Oh, I didn't see it. Let me look.
Oh, I'm sorry, if you can hold on, Keith. If everyone who's not Keith can mute themselves, that'd be great. Please proceed, Keith. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. My name again is Keith Ridley, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Director of Health in strong support of this measure. And I'm here for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, that's all we have in terms of virtual testifiers, but we do have comments proffered by the Healthcare Association of Hawaii, as well as supportive testimony proffered by an individual. Members, any questions for the Department of Health? Okay, seeing no further questions, then we'll move on to our last agenda item, SB 1021 relating to burials. Please note we heard a substantially similar measure in this committee. This includes the use of traditional Native Hawaiian burial practices in the treatment and disposal of human remains, including the use of alkaline hydrolysis and natural organic reduction, and it would require the Department of Health to adopt rules to effectuate some of these newly permitted disposition practices. On SB 1021, we have Fisher and Associates, Dean Fisher in support.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I stand in strong support of this bill and my written testimony. I ask that this bill become effective immediately after passage, and I'm not opposed and would welcome regulatory rules by the state. I've been a licensed funeral director for 37 years and have worked at the Mayo Clinic and UCLA's David Geffen School of Medicine. I've operated alkaline hydrolysis equipment for the past 15 years at both of these institutions, and I'm currently offering it at a funeral home here in Minnesota. The benefits of this technology are amazing. It has a 15-year perfect operational and safety record. The water has been tested with the City of Los Angeles over 30 times. It releases a sterile effluent with no pathogens or DNA. 21 states have already approved alkaline hydrolysis, including California, Oregon, and Washington. And 60% of cremation customers are selecting alkaline hydrolysis when they were given a choice. In Hawaii alone, it would save over 2.5 million pounds of carbon dioxide a year if we use this technology versus flame cremation. Finally, we're seeing about 30% greater amount of cremated remains at the end of this process. I could go on, but this is about positive change for the environment and for Native Hawaiian burial traditions. Thank you, and I'll be around to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fisher. We also have Pete Dilworth with the Mililani Group Incorporated in opposition.
There I am. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I thank you for the opportunity to share the reasons for my opposition relating to SB 1021. My name is Pete Dilworth. I am Vice President of Operations with Mililani Group. I stand on my written testimony in opposition to this bill and am available to answer any questions. Currently, only 23 states require training and certification prior to being entrusted with the disposition of loved ones who have requested cremation. Certification would ensure operators have the latest training and ensures the utmost care and respect is provided to the deceased. This training would complement machine-specific on-the-job training. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dilworth. We also have Kavehi Correa with Aloha Mortuary in support.
unmuted. Aloha, Chair and Vice Chair, committee members. Thank you kindly. My name is Kavehi Correa. I grew up in Hawaiian Homes on the Big Island, graduated with a major in science, specifically genetics, and now currently work in the death care industry. I wanted to highlight 3 matters that have been reoccurring topics throughout this process. And the first is pricing for consumers. In a PDF provided by Kukuamau, a care home in Hawaii that provides a cross examination for their clients, it is listed with the price comparison for direct cremation prices, and they range by mortuary. So, when we're asked about the pricing for alkaline hydrolysis, it's really up to the mortuary for their prices. Oahu mortuary for direct cremation with no service is priced at $975, and then you have Dodo mortuary at $1,020 listed right here, and then Borthwick on Oahu is listed at $3,150. The alkaline hydrolysis cost for the consumer would range by mortuary supply demand on an average cost. Yes, the cost is a premium for the actual machine, but in totality, it's about only $100,000 more for the best of the best technology in water cremation technology, and then the best retort technology, and that includes shipping and training in Hawaii. The second thing that I wanted to highlight is the regulations, and we welcome the regulations, and we feel that if treated with the same regulatory standards as embalming or fire cremation, that this would be extremely easy and may even be a preferential disposition given the fact that there are no pollutants and no effluent in the discharge. The second point to that is that we should remove natural organic reduction as a means to define alkaline hydrolysis. This bill and the purpose of this bill was to preserve the bone and the EV the best that we could, to perpetuate our people, the Kanaka people, as well as the people in Hawaii, to have the choice, to be able to have the choice to be laid to rest as they wish. The third point that I wanted to make was that for the consumers, is that 2 minutes? I'm sorry.
No problem. You just
thank you so much.
But you can, if you had something else, you can say it quickly.
I just wanted to say that, people in Hawaii, we're surrounded by water. We, as a human body, are made 90% of water. The people of Hawaii enjoy swimming in water. We should be able to leave this earth in water if we choose to. And for the preservation of Kanaka and our people, we should have the best technology available, afforded to us to perpetuate our rights. And that's, I just ask you, and I humbly ask you folks to support this bill. It's a win-win-win. Kanaka, all the people in Hawaii, and the environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kavehi. We also have the Hawaii Funeral and Cemetery Association, Jay Morford, in opposition.
Good afternoon, Chair Johanson, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Jay Morford. I'm speaking on behalf of the Hawaii Funeral and Cemetery Association that represents 14 mortuaries, licensed mortuaries, and 10 cemeteries throughout the state of Hawaii. I want to thank the previous committee for the amendments that they've made on this bill. We're supportive and thank you for those amendments. We also want to point out that the association is not opposed to the Hawaiian community having a choice to practice their traditional burial practices and in the manner that they wish to practice them in. Our complete opposition to this bill has been the lack of any information coming from the Department of Health on who's going to regulate this industry, or I should say this practice and disposition, or what a regulatory agency is within the agency is going to look at who's going to monitor the processes throughout the alkaline hydrolysis practice. We also want to make mention that on a normal cremation process with fire, you take the bones from the retorts and you put them in a processor, and the processor processes those bones into ash or cremated remains. The purpose of alkaline hydrolysis is to take the skeletal remains out of the alkaline hydrolysis facility and for the Hawaiian community to be able to inter those. We believe they should have that opportunity to do that. However, we do believe the Department of Health needs to look at how that should be regulated on if there should be a burial permit, if that process is going to be allowed, and how those remains will be handled after they leave that facility. Also, who can actually run those facilities? Should it be a licensed mortuary running those facilities, or can anyone get a license to run those facilities? Those are our concerns. We'd be happy to answer any questions. We'd also be happy to work with the Department of Health and the stakeholders to try to come up with regulation around this process that will help the Hawaiian community practice their cultural practices. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We also have Mililani Trask in support as an individual.
Aloha, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Aloha, everyone. I'm so thankful to be here for our Hawaiian Civic Clubs. This makes the 9th year that we have tried, but for our people, it's been more than 120 years for us to finally have an opportunity for a Hawaiian style burial. I wanted to augment my testimony in 3 respects. One is I'd like to have the effective date set immediately upon passage. I think we've waited for many, many years and we're ready to go on it. The second comment I have with regards to the bill is this term, natural organic reduction. It doesn't really relate at all to our traditional practices. It has come up in previous hearings. Frankly, I'm not sure what it's doing in the bill. Natural organic reduction is not in conformity with the traditional practice, which was to steam the bones and the body throughout the day and night, and then to take the sterile long bones for interment, the ali'is to the burial caves and the rest of our peoples to the crypt area, with the remains going to the sea. So I don't like this phrase natural organic reduction, and I don't believe that it should be in the bill. I think it should be stricken out. The third point I want to make has to do with regulatory scheme. I'm glad to see the language is added. I wanted to point out something that perhaps might be in the committee report that issues out, and that is note that this technology has been in Hawaii for longer than 15 years. It's been used by the state, and it is currently technology housed in the Kaka'ako Center of the University JABSM, the John A. Burns School of Medicine. This research is already under the University of Hawaii Office of Research Compliance. And then beneath that, the Office of the University Veterinarian. But the vivarium itself, the unit, is at the Kaka'ako Center. I sent a memo earlier this session to Gene Ward. He wanted to go and take a look at it. But in terms of where this technology is, it's in the state of Hawaii. It's been here for 15 years. It is at the JABSM Center. If legislators would like to go there to see it, I wanted to see it, but I couldn't. I'm not a doctor and I didn't have the protocols. But one person you might want to speak with who's not Hawaiian, who's very supportive. He's been trying to get it into our JABSM system for years. I'm talking about Mr. Stephen LaBrash, the director of the U of H Willed Body Program. We've been working with him and he's been so supportive. But if you're looking for people at the university involved in research, they're at the Office of Research Compliance. And the other division is the Willed Body Program at the John A. Burns School of Medicine. So I think we're capable of looking at regulations. We've had the technology here and it's actually brought in and used by the state of Hawaii itself. I don't have a problem in terms of looking at regulation, but I do want to end by saying that we're not looking at regulating a small new technology out of existence. We're looking at broadening regulations for new technology to bring into the state of Hawaii that the existing cemetery and funeral associations have refused to bring in because they don't want to make the payment and upgrade the technology. But we're ready to service the Hawaiian community. And up until this point, there's not really been any option for us in the existing industry here in Hawaii. Thank you. I'm available for questions. Aloha.
Thank you very much. We also have Pono Ledford testifying in support.
Aloha, my name is Pono Ledford. I'm a physician on the Big Island in Hilo, and I fully support this bill for alkaline hydrolysis. I do think it's needed, and it's about time that us Native Hawaiians are able to practice our own Native traditional practices for burial. I'm going to stand by my testimony. I do have some comments to make. For instance, our opposition, Peter, today is talking about on-the-job training. Of course, there's going to be on-the-job training to learn how to use this technology here. That's, I mean, common sense. Same thing when you have a flame-based cremation. You got to be taught how to learn the equipment. I'm sure there's going to be adequate training for people to learn how to do this alkaline hydrolysis. Again, the fluid that comes out of this process is 100% sterile. We use this technology in medicine to dispose of biochemical waste, toxic waste, tissue that's been infected with viruses or bacteria that we need to dispose of. That's what this technology, they use in the hospitals to destroy these contaminated remains. I do want people to think about where some of the people that we're talking about, for instance, Jay Manafort, he wrote 2 testimonies that he has submitted, one under the Hawaiian Memorial Life Plan and one for the Hawaii Funeral and Cemetery Association. He's also the president of Borthwick Mortuary, who is actually owned by Service Corp International, a company that's in Texas. I'm not trying to offend him or anyone. I'm just saying that let us Native Hawaiians take care of our dead the way we see fit, not mainland companies coming in here telling me how I can bury my family members. I stand by my testimony. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Dr. Ledford. We also have Kumuhina Kalu in support.
Aloha maya kako, Chair and committee members. Mahalo nui oko no ko oko manawa nui. Mahalo no ko oko olu olu. Ai mai I keia mau manao I keia la. I urge this committee to please consider perhaps some of the more salient realities that we should be discussing or that we should be acknowledging. And that is that through capitalism and through consumer interest on behalf of private industry.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm just going to stop you real quick, Kumu. If everybody else who isn't Kumu can mute themselves, I think that'll be helpful. Sorry.
I'm sorry, that might be me because
Oh,
I'm in a
no
public.
problem. Sorry, I just wanted
No. I'm in a
sorry.
public area, and I have no control over the background.
Okay.
So, once again, I do urge you to consider perhaps the elephant in the room is actually that this would not only create a burden upon private industry representatives here, but also its longer term impact is that they would look at a different kind of fiscal impact upon their operations. But with that said, I think that you have the ethical and moral obligation to really consider that the Kanaka community continues to literally, short of coming on bended knee, to beg for all kinds of things. And this hearing today is but one of the many things that Kanaka have to continually come forward to request consideration and to have to reconcile through testimony and coming up with all kinds of reasons to convince people who are in political authority to make a better decision. And in this case, I believe that there's been enough compelling information that has been presented. I recognize what the private industry folks are saying here yet again today, but I do ask your consideration in allowing this bill to move forward and to give greater opportunity and greater choice to the Hawaiian community, to my fellow Kanaka. I thank you again for your consideration and for everybody's continued dedication to the discussion. Mahalo.
Thank you, Kumu.
Mahalo.
Members, please note that that's the extent of our present testifiers on this measure. We also have submitted testimony both in support and opposition to this measure. Members, any questions on SB 1021? Okay, seeing no questions on SB 1021, then we will recess.
Chairman, I'm so sorry, technical problems.
All right, Representative Har, please proceed.
Yes, thank you. Okay, is somebody here from the Department of Health? Did we get testimony from the Department of Health?
No, the Department of Health did not provide testimony.
Okay. That's a little disconcerting, given the fact that I think they would, there's some sections, I think they would be required to enforce some of the provisions in here, create administrative rules. Okay, so let me ask Mr. Dean Fisher.
Yes, still here.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for testifying from the mainland. We appreciate your testimony. In your written testimony, you had noted that approximately 20, how many states did you say? 21 states have passed, yeah, 21 states have passed legislation in support of the alkaline hydrolysis technology. Of those 21 states, do you know how many have some type of regulation by the state with respect to the technology?
I can speak for the 6 states that I've helped. All 6 of them to this point, all have regulatory through either the Department of Health or they have their funeral and cemetery boards. Like California has Department of Consumer Affairs, which is funeral and cemetery. Minnesota has the Department of Mortuary Science. So each one is all through the Department of Health that regulates these, and that's what I would recommend.
Okay, so there are, at least with respect to the 6 states that you've helped, you are aware of regulatory schemes specifically set up for alkaline hydrolysis technology.
Absolutely, yeah. I would recommend it. It just makes everything a lot smoother, and it creates a standard for everybody. So everybody's playing by the same rules right out of the gate.
Okay, Mr. Fisher, is it possible, do you have, would you have links or something to send us regarding those regulatory schemes, just to give us an idea of what we're talking about?
Yeah, I'd be happy to send those off to you.
Yeah, would you, if you wouldn't mind sending it to the chair, that would be great. And then his office can forward it to all of us.
Yes,
Okay.
that's easy enough to do. So,
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Thank you so much for being there to testify from the mainland.
You're most welcome.
Okay, Mr. Chair, may I ask some additional questions, please?
Please.
Ms. Correa, Kavehi Correa.
Hi, yes,
Hi,
I'm
Ms.
here.
Correa, how are you? Again, you're a wonderful
I'm very
testifier. Thank you. You always do a fantastic job with respect to your testimony. So you heard the testimony of Mr. Fisher, who is a consultant who specializes in this area, and you too, in your verbal testimony, indicated that you would be okay with regulation too. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and would you also support the Department of Health? Go ahead, Ms. Correa.
Absolutely. I think it should. Absolutely. I think the Department of Health should be the direct oversight, and we should be regulated under these just as everything else, the cremation and the embalming. I think it's critical.
Okay, good. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Ms. Correa. Thank you again for your verbal testimony. Dr. Ledford.
Yes, I'm here.
Good afternoon, Dr. Ledford. Thank you for being here and thank you for your testimony, your very passionate testimony. Dr. Ledford, so you've also heard the testimony of Mr. Fisher and Ms. Correa. Are you two in support of some type of regulations over the alkaline hydrolysis technology or process?
Absolutely. I mean, regulations are needed. Again, this is a new technology. And yes, absolutely, 100%.
And would you also advocate for the Department of Health being that regulatory body?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Ledford, and thank you for your testimony. Mililani Trask. Is she still on?
Can you hear now?
Yes. Hi, Mililani, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good. Thank you for being here. Nice to see you. Thank you for your passionate testimony. Okay, so one of the things I learned from your testimony was with respect to the technology already being in Hawaii for 15 years, and that the technology is already being performed at JAPSOM, at the JAPSOM Center.
Yes, I learned this from the director of the University of Hawaii Willed Body Program. His name is Steve Labrash.
Okay.
He actually went down to take a look at it at the Kaka'ako Center. Because of the medical protocols and protections in place, we can't go down.
Right.
But I had sent this information to Gene Ward because he was a legislator who wanted to see it. Steve Labrash has gone in there to look at it. It is under the university veterinarian, but that is a division of the Office of Research Compliance. This is their area, yeah, is research compliance.
Okay, so the question is, I mean, I think that's one thing to understand, that perhaps they are, well, they are in fact utilizing this technology within JAPSOM, within the JAPSOM Center. But I don't know if the university or the Office of Research Compliance would necessarily be the correct regulatory body. I don't necessarily.
No, I think it's Department of Health. I do.
Okay,
I think other states treat it that way, but to the extent that we actually have some medical professionals that's part of our state team, I thought it would be good to check with them, but I think the appropriate body is Department of Health.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so Mililani, I'm going to ask you a very sensitive subject, but I think if anyone can take on the subject, it's you. So one of the things that has been raised to me, and whether it's an actual viable concern is another issue, but the question has become now, I think this process is wonderful. I mean, I think it is absolutely fascinating. It makes sense. It's good for the environment. I mean, I'm sold all the way around. But the question then became, the question came up with respect to now the decedent, is now wrapped, the EV, the bones are now wrapped. And what happens to those bones at that point? Now, God forbid, let's just say, anything is a possibility. If there's some nefarious person out there who doesn't want some development to occur, and that person takes the EV and happens to dump it on some piece of property or whatnot. You understand what I'm saying? And again, I'm not trying to, in no way am I trying to offend anyone. I'm just talking about, what do we do? What happens? Because again, I understand the cultural and the religious aspects of the sacredness of the EV and doing what that family feels is right. Those, the descendants or whomever feel is right for that EV. But we're not tracking it. So should we have a permit for that EV, or what can we do to ensure that that EV is being rested in a place that's pono versus being utilized for something nefarious?
Well, I think we have to look at it not only in terms of Hawaiian cultural practice, but everybody's cultural practice. I mean, right now we have many, many Asian families who have flame cremation. They don't inter the bodies anywhere. They go back home to the butsuron. No one requires that we don't force the Asian community to take their EVs and put them here or put them there. In terms of a burial permit, it is already in the law. If a family seeks to do that, they have that option. But if they seek to take these things under a permit for burial at sea, that would also be appropriate, and it is currently allowed now. I know that there are some folks like my own family. We have our family burial area at Vananalua Church in Hana, Maui. My grandmother lays there, her 8 children there, and now my cousins and I also will be there. Forcing someone to get a burial permit when they may not need one, I think is unreasonable. What we have now are many races in Hawaii. Some will take the iwis back and take it home to the Butsuran. Some will take it to the Hongwanji and get a little niche there. Some will take it back to where their grandparents lay, as we will. And those who have the aumakua to the sea will take it to the ocean. I'm not really concerned with this repeated demand that we have to get a burial permit. Others don't. Why would we do that if we're not going to bury it on the land? Why would we do it if we go to the sea or if we have our own crypts now? And just for other ali'is, I mean, I have to tell you, the ali'i burials are used to this day. Some of them go to the mausoleum, but in recent years, we have had iwis taken up to the burial caves in Mauna Kea. Right now, we have the agreement in the rules with Mauna Kea that ashes can be distributed there. We have never had a fight in Mauna Kea on this point. The fight is, where do we go to worship? Right. So you could even check the Mauna Kea rules. It wouldn't be a problem if people want to go there with ashes. And the Mauna Kea rules have also accommodated our Asian families too, that wish to distribute ashes at the Mauna there. I don't really see it as much of a problem. I think we work with the Department of Health and maybe get some help from our U of H Will Body program and our U of H veterinarian services under the Office of Research Compliance. It's something you work together with people on.
Absolutely. And thank you very much. And I think that you brought up a really good point. It should not be something that's only akin only to our Native Hawaiian community. I mean, I absolutely agree. That all of the other cultures and ethnicities are allowed to bring home their iwi as well. I don't dispute that at all. And I thank you for bringing that up and reminding me of that fact.
Thanks, Representative.
There should be an even playing field. But that said, and again, don't kill the messenger. Again, the question has come up that, God forbid, if there's somebody should use that iwi for nefarious purposes to stop a development or whatnot, how do we deal with that? You know what I'm saying? So again, I'm not saying that building, requiring a permit for the iwi is the right thing to do. I'm just trying to understand, what if that situation, because there's been allegations of people doing this in the past at certain, where they wanted to stop development and they knew that Native Hawaiian iwi would certainly do that. Just under the SHPD rules and OIBC rules. And so, they would know that something like that could absolutely stop the development that was already, permitted and that's been approved. So I just don't know how to answer that question, Mililani. And so, I mean, this is something all I do is just bring it up.
One of the things that we always deal with in the Hawaiian community are the allegations. I've heard these allegations as well, but I have yet to see a case that showed me that it was the truth. You're always going to have some people who do bad things. Allegations shouldn't be what our laws are based upon. And when I hear the question that someone would take their mother's body, their child's, their grandmother, and do something nefarious, it is just not our way. And the reason why we've been here for 12 years and waiting for 150 is so we could do it right. Allegations are what they are. People making statements without any kind of proof. That is what allegation is.
Okay, thank you very much, Mililani Trask. I very much appreciate your mana'o. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. The only concern I have is I have questions for the Department of Health, and unfortunately, they have not opined on this bill, and that's my biggest concern at this juncture. So I guess I will try to reach out to them separately. Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing no further questions, then we'll recess for decision making. Recess. Okay, reconvening our Thursday, April 1st, 2 p.m. agenda for decision making. My thanks to everyone who participated today in testimony, as well as to our members for being here today. On SB 151 relating to the statewide traffic code, because the House has already made an amendment and the effective date of the bill is defective, meaning for those who may not be constantly involved with the legislature, it just means that this would eventually have to be taken to conference and reconciled. So it encourages further discussion. Because the bill has a defective date, the recommendation is to pass this measure as is and without amendments. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 151 HD1 as is. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Aquino. Representative Har.
Aye.
Representative Hashem. Representative Kong is excused. Representative Mizuno. Representative Morikawa. Representative Onishi.
Aye.
Representative Tarnes.
Aye.
Representative Matsumoto.
Aye.
Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Next on SB 1333 relating to the Uniform Controlled Substances Act. I do want to note the AG's concern and issue that they brought up in the committee report. However, as the Senate Judiciary Committee made this amendment and it passed out of the House Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee before us, I do want to give deference to them, even though I share the Attorney General's concern. So I will note in the committee report the Attorney General's concern, and I do have prior concurrence from Chair Nakashima to insert a defective date into this measure of January 1st, 2050, so that we ensure we have to take this bill to conference to potentially reconcile whether or not references to the penal code should be contained in this particularly titled bill. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Har.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the recommendation, and I appreciate the explanation with respect to the Judiciary Chair as well as the committee. That said, I do believe this bill is unconstitutional on its face, so respectfully, I will be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Har. Members, any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 1333 SD2 HD1 with amendments, noting the excused absence of Representative Kong, who will be noted excused for the entire agenda. Are there any reservations? Are there any additional noes in addition to Representative Har? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, members, on SB 244 relating to food donation. I think this is a very timely and excellent measure given many of our food access issues brought on by the pandemic. I will be recommending several amendments, and they include the following. Let's see. On page 4, lines 16 through 18 of the bill, deleting the content that reads, including where the needy person is directly involved in the harvest of the donated food. I think the immunity provisions are broad enough that it doesn't really matter how the food is acquired. It's expired, but you reasonably believe in good faith that it's still edible. You're able to donate it, and liability does not accrue. So recommend deleting that provision. Also, on page 5, there's a reference to hungry persons. Hungry is not defined, but needy is defined in the statute. So we'll have conforming amendments to change any references to hungry persons to be needy persons. Additionally, we'll be making various technical and non-substantive amendments, as well as inserting a defective date of January 1, 2050 to ensure there's continued discussion on this bill. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 244 SD2 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, members, on SB 329. Relating to condominiums, again, we saw and passed out a substantially similar measure. The recommendation here is simply to insert a defective date of January 1, 2050 to ensure further discussion as we take this to conference and likely pass this measure. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, Vice Chair, for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 329 SD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, members, on SB 754 relating to real property transactions. My thanks to the advice of the Water Land Chair on this measure. I'd simply like to pass this out with one amendment and inserting a defective date of January 1, 2050. Members, any comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Vice Chair, for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 474 SD1 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, my thanks also on the next few measures to the Agriculture Chair. On SB 489 relating to agricultural buildings, also just so that the House has made at least one amendment, inserting a defective date here of January 1, 2050. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 489 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next on SB 186, as the House has already made an amendment and a defective date is included, the recommendation here is just to pass this measure as is. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 186 HD1 as is. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next on SB 345 relating to cosmetics. The House has already made an amendment here and it includes a defective date. So we'll work on this one in conference. The recommendation is to pass this measure as is. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 345 SD2 HD1 as is. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next on SB 1387 relating to microchip identification. With the prior concurrence of the Agricultural Chair, I would like to take the Department of Agriculture's suggested amendment and include the plant quarantine branch in the definition of owner so that they end up being effectively excluded from these provisions. I would also on page 6 like to delete some of the contents in lines 2 through 4, which is, excuse me, which is provided that the counties may by ordinance dispense with or modify the licensing requirements of this chapter. That's unnecessary because cats are not required to be licensed under Chapter 143. And counties already have the authority to regulate cats, including licensure under Section 143. Additionally, and it already has a defective date, so we'll keep what's in there. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 1387 SD1 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, next on SB 768, the recommendation here with the prior concurrence of the Transportation Chair, my thanks for the help on this, Transportation Chair, is to replace in the task force let's see, subpoint 8 on page 3, line 9, which is one local or regional representative and an auto manufacturing company is invited by the chairperson. Instead of a manufacturing company, a trade association would replace this as per the request of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. And I think this comports with what the transportation chair was wanting to accomplish by adding them. We'll also insert a effective date of January 1, 2050. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 768 SD2 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, SB 1212. This is needed for federal conformity. The recommendation here is just to pass this measure with a defective date, the insertion of a defective date of January 1, 2050. Members, any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 1212 SD2 HD1 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, members, on SB 1291 relating to transportation and auto cycles. The recommendation here, as the House has already made an amendment and it includes a defective date, is to pass this measure as is. Members, any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 1291 SD1 HD1 as is. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next, on SB 1150 relating to skilled nursing facility licensing. The House has already made an amendment on this measure and it includes a defective date already. So the recommendation here is to pass this measure as is. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 1150 SD1 HD1 as is. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. And on SB 1021 relating to burials, had some good discussion both on the House bill and the Senate bill. I would recommend that we pass this measure with amendments, which include the following. I would like to remove the natural organic reduction provisions and content. I agree with many of those who testified today that needlessly complicates this bill and adds a whole lot of other additional concerns. So we'll be removing the content pertaining to natural organic reduction. We'll also be making conforming amendments. Sometimes in the measure, there are references to cremation that perhaps may not comport with alkaline hydrolysis, as well as making various technical and non-substantive amendments. I did get the prior concurrence of the Health and Human Services Chair, as well as the Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Chair, to make these amendments. Members, any comments or questions on the recommendation? Okay, seeing no comments or questions, Vice Chair for the vote, please.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass SB 1021 SD2 HD2 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Are there any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, seeing as that's our last measure, again, my thanks to everybody who testified today and to our members. This meeting is adjourned.